Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray. What's this? A postcard. Very, very exciting. Oh, I wanted to do that without looking. Hang on. What's this? A postcard. No, I can't do it. I'm terrible. Anyway, just to prove that that's not just a fake background. Look, Ancient Warfare Answers has its first postcard. Very, very exciting. Red letter day. So for those of you who want to ask a question and want to send a postcard, just like this one from Euchale. Thank you, Euchale. Much respected and appreciated. P.O. Box 222, Belfield, NSW 2191, Australia. Will get one to me and I can get very excited. Don't send too many because then my lovely lurbs will be covered up. Dear Murray, a card from Heidelberg, gorgeous. I have two questions, if I may ask. Have you ever played Age of Mythology? If so, how do you like the depiction of speech of the various armies of the game? Unfortunately, I have never played Age of Mythology. My video game playing days are gone, I think, these days. I've got friends who want to play Baldur's Gate and some others, and I think Close Combat 5 and a couple of the Age of Empires. No, Total War. I think Total War Napoleon was the last thing I tried to play. Anyway, so very quick answer to your first question. Second question, how much of your research happens online and how much from physical books? Any recommendations on how to find good books related to a topic, any source other than books and the internet? Right. Well, I do indeed love books. And if I could put the camera that way and in the other rooms, there are indeed many books, mostly academic. And in many cases, they are still the best way to go. A lot of those are not fully available online if you've used Google Books, or obviously Google Scholar is certainly one place. But often you'll find that passages missing. And I don't know whether it's just me or whether it's everybody, but it always seems to be the precise page I want is the page that is indeed missing from my Google Books preview. That's always frustrating. Obviously, in some cases, books are out of print and hard to get, but part of my obsessive compulsive book buying is about tracking down said books, getting a book, that's nigh on unavailable and then suddenly comes available is always a joy. Sometimes the price is too far and too much, but that's okay. Wait for a better price. But I think in this day and age, there are more opportunities to learn online, whether you use JStore or Perseus. Lacus Curtius is another great example for reading sources in their original. And it's now a bit of a shock when one of those sites doesn't have, Atlas is another, one of those sites doesn't have a particular ancient source translated. And albeit those sources are not necessarily the most up-to-date translation, they're generally pretty reliable. A lot of the ones that have gone out of copyright are indeed very good translations. They might not be the most up-to-date, but then when you're an obsessive book buyer like me, you can both use the online and the most recent translation and have a comparison, which is interesting as well as a piece of scholarship to compare how particular passages and particular phrases in the Greek or the Latin have been translated. So that is always, for me as an ancient historian, the first stop is not the modern scholarship, so to speak, but the ancient sources themselves, going and reading what the actual ancient sources said where you can. And that sometimes involves, of course, going into the Latin and the Greek nitty-gritty to work out exactly what is being said and the nuance of what being said. And then from there, for me, going to the more modern studies, whether it be books or looking at journal articles and things like that, and indeed JStore and Google Scholar. I use Google Scholar much less. Other places to go for those. When it comes to a particularly exciting journal article, I know that sounds odd, but people who understand. I will try and buy a copy of the actual journal itself. Most often those are old for me, so I'll go on to ABE Books, and try and find a copy of the Journal of Roman Studies or the Journal of Hellenistic Studies or other journals. Surprisingly often available in most of those cases. And so then what you've got, of course, is that because you can do a lot of that reading online now, you can do the cross-referencing and the intersecting far more readily than you can with a collection of books, physical books, or even in a library, because you'll spend much more time running between the shelves. But what it can mean online, and I know any of my friends who've seen when I shared my screen for a Zoom call and they go, how many tabs have you got open? I'm like, well, that's only one of 5 windows. But yeah, hundreds of tabs open, and often they're of multiple ancient sources on the same event, and I'm cross-referencing those to see what different nuances each different account says. And that's something that can really be done online. Every now and then I will go and grab the actual translation and compare it to that, or grab several other translations and compare. But that certainly is something that I've been able to do a lot better online in the last few years than previously. And obviously with JStore, you can get the free account, or you can pay for the account, which gives you more access to more articles. You can generally get across most of the things that you need. I also have the electronic copies of all the back issues of Ancient Warfare, for instance. So that's a really great resource too. Some of the authors who've written for Ancient Warfare are, top-notch scholars, and some of their material that they've delivered in our format and sort of general readership format is top-notch to this day. So in answer to your question, Euchale, that's generally how I do it. Finding good books is another issue, obviously. Generally speaking, you can find good books on secondhand book stores. So ABE Books, ABE Books, ABE Books. And then, of course, there's a plethora of modern Ancient Warfare books coming out from Pen and Sword and other publishers as well. I've got one coming up from Amberley on the end of Roman Britain, late Roman Britain, coming up, I presume, next year. Not sure. I've got the proofs. They came through in the email this morning, so that's exciting. It's going to be called Finis Britanniae. Very exciting. But, there's new books that come out. Often, if you're on top of new scholarship, you can find references to new articles and things like that. It's been a long time since I went to the university library in Sydney here, and went and found l'année philologique and, scanning what the most recent publications in that field are. That's certainly one way of doing it. I'm sure there are sort of compilation blogs or lists online that tell you what the new articles and new references are across scholarship. Certainly easier to do now than it ever used to be. You used to have to wait a couple of years before the latest issue of l'année philologique came out, and then you would look at it, and of course by then it would be 2 years out of date, so you would need to be on top of all of the other magazines. And often in a bibliography and a further reading of one of those journal articles, or you get more recent publications. So, if you find something that's published in 2023, that should have an up-to-date bibliography of everything that person has consulted, and they should have consulted the most recent material available to them. And so in that case, you can go, here's a list of everything I want. So my buy later list in ABE Books is, I get the email telling me it's too full and I need to get rid of some. So I have many, I'll buy that. Same with Amazon. eBay's another place. Often eBay, you can find copies of books that the seller isn't necessarily sure of what they've got or how valuable it is to you. Often, these ancient warfare titles are quite niche, so they're not necessarily. There's two things that can happen. It can either go for a mozza, or it can go for a lot less than you'd be willing to pay for it, in which case snatch it now. And I may, in a couple of occasions, have bought multiple copies of a book knowing that it's worth a lot more and seeing it for a really cheap price. So I'm like, I have to have a second copy of that book, even though I really don't need a second copy of that book. So have I covered your questions? Let me have a look. I believe I have. I haven't played Age of Mythology. How much of my research happens online? Proportionally, probably these days, 50-50, I would have thought. And I say that, being surrounded by books, so I can just reach behind me and grab them. There's another stack there. There's Arians and Abyssus and the Penguin. There's piles of books here and piles of books here. I try and keep them off camera so they don't spoil the aesthetic. But those of you who've seen old Ancient Warfare answers know that when I was in the other room, I had piles of books stretching to infinity. Now, yes, and good books, yes, a decent secondhand bookshop online, obviously, eBay, Amazon, other booksellers. ABE Books is my go-to for secondhand copies. Any other sources other than the internet? Yes, and I think one of the things that's available to you, even if you're an academic or if you're a postgraduate student, you can talk to supervisors and lecturers. But I think talking to your colleagues, and obviously on Ancient Warfare, when we do the big podcast, as opposed to the little podcast, there's sort of 6 or 7 of us who are all active ancient historians and talking about what we're doing, and we can run ideas by people and discuss them, send emails to other colleagues and say, I'm thinking of this, what do you think? Even sending drafts of articles and things to people for feedback. That's certainly a way of bouncing ideas around. And interestingly for me, when I was younger, it was very much like, oh, I don't want to give away what I'm working on. But what I've found over time is that, well, no brain works the way mine does. So no one's thinking like me. And so even if I give them some of my stuff, there's no way they would have agreed, not agreed, but there's no way they would think the same way I do and connect the same things the way I connected them. So I'm far more open and able to say, here's something I've written, knowing that very unlikely that I'm going to say something the same way that someone else would, even if we're working in the same very narrow field. Anyway, so I hope that's answered your question. Thank you so much. That's going to stay up there now. Sorry, Athenaeus and Aulus Gellius, that's going to block you for a while. He can stand next to my model of Miyamoto Musashi back, oh gosh, I was about 18, I think, when I made that. Anyway, thank you. You, of course, can ask us a question. You can send us a postcard too. I gave you the address at the start. You can send us an email. You can comment on one of the videos. Look forward to that. And I very much look forward to the next postcard. Thanks, and see you next time on the next Ancient Warfare Answers with me, Murray.